I need a hand. First of all, thank you very much for being here today, and I want to thank Derek for this invitation. You know, like I said, you know, we have the People's Party of Canada, a very strong message. And you know, when Derek called me and he said, Maxime, I'm doing an event, and I want you to speak about what you believe, what will be the best policies for our country. And I said yes. And if I received the same offer from Jason Kenney, I'll say yes also, because the message is too important for you from Alberta. And what I'm saying, what I will tell you today, actually it is not new. I said that in Quebec 5 years ago. I was in Saskatoon, Regina, St. John, New Brunswick, and Halifax, and I said the same thing. It's very important for the future of our country that we change what happened in Ottawa right now. So I just want to start by what it is not working in our country. And I understand your feeling about what it is not working. And in Quebec, you know, your slogan, equality of independence, it is not a new slogan for us. If you're coming from Quebec, you know Daniel Johnson. Daniel Johnson, in 1965, wrote a book called Equality of Independence, and he was elected after that Premier of Quebec the year after in 1966. And that slogan became a rallying cry for those who wanted more powers for Quebec and who threatened to push for separation if they didn't get it. So what they got, however, was that in Quebec, starting in 1965, was decades of political, economic, and constitutional disruption that divided Quebec itself and also in Canada. One government after the other asked not just for more powers, but also for more money from Ottawa. And they used the separation threat to blackmail the rest of the country. It did not bring very good result. We've talked a lot about political independence since the 1970s in Quebec. Meanwhile, we've built a system of economic dependence that is become more and more elaborate. Quebec has one of the biggest and most interventionist governments in North America, and one of the heaviest fiscal burdens. We in Quebec rank among the most indebted societies in the industrial world. And of course, we get a big chunk of money from the equalization program. What I'm telling you right now, I said the same thing in Quebec 5 years ago. I said that I'm not proud to be Quebecers when we received equalization money. Quebec must receive zero money from equalization, the equalization formula, because Quebec will be a richer province. Same thing from New Brunswick. Same thing for also Nova Scotia. And actually, I was in New Brunswick and I did an interview over there after delivering a speech and saying that. And the journalist said, Mr. Bernier, you're in New Brunswick. What is your goal? And I said, you know, I want people to know the People's Party of Canada, and for sure, I want them to vote for us at the next election. And the journalist told me, you know, you're coming here, you're saying to people in our province that you will cut equalization formula, you will give less money from the equalization formula, and you want to have our support. I said yes. I said yes. And, you know, and I think that people understand here, they're proud people like I'm a proud Quebecers. And I'm sure they want their province to be richer. And I'm sure they want their province to receive less equalization money because the province will be a rich province. And I want their province to develop their own natural resources. We must speak about that. We must speak about that. And you know, I have some support over there, and I'm not afraid to have that discussion. People understand. And actually, the Premier of New Brunswick, the new Premier, said the same thing. He said that the Canadian government must cut the equalization money, and that will give him the right incentive to develop great economic policies at the provincial level. Coming from a Prime Minister who received equalization money. We must celebrate that. We must celebrate that, and that's important. So I want to... We must celebrate that and speak about that. It's very important for the future of our country. And I know that here in Alberta, you want to have that discussion. But let's, not only on equalization, but only maybe on pipelines. And I will have that discussion with you today. My message today about equality and independence. Don't do the same mistake that we did in Quebec. Of course, Alberta is different from Quebec in many ways. You don't feel threatened linguistically and culturally, and there is a strong, small government at the provincial level. You don't have a big, fat government at the provincial level. My suggestion, but if you compare that with other provinces, yeah, you're right. So my suggestion today is to unite with Canadians in other provinces, including Quebec, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, who want changes in the way that will respect our Constitution. We are much more likely to get concrete results together if we try to be sure that our politicians in Ottawa will respect our Constitution. The main problems affecting Alberta, affecting you, and other regions of our country are economic in nature, but they derive from the malfunctioning of our federation. And there are two aspects to it. On the one hand, the federal government today intervenes massively in provincial jurisdiction, and in particular in healthcare and education, two areas where it has no constitutional legitimacy whatsoever. And at the same time, provinces make policies that interfere upon federal powers and block some of the economic benefits that should be getting from living in one federal union. And in some cases, the federal government itself is simply afraid to use its powers to impose a national solution because it does not want to offend important voting blocks in some provinces. That is not what the fathers of our Confederation had intended. The objective of the 1867 Act was not to subordinate provincial governments to a central authority, or a central authority to regional whims, but rather to have sovereign provinces within the limits of their powers, dealing with local matters that directly affected their citizens. And a sovereign government within its limit of its own power at the national level dealing with matters of national interest. As you may know, I propose to put an end to Ottawa's intrusions in provincial matters such as healthcare and education, and to transfer tax points to provinces and let them manage their affairs with complete autonomy. That should appeal to you, to Alberta, to Albertans who have already been our closest support in Quebec, because that's the same thing in Quebec. The Quebec and Quebecers, they don't want that the federal government interfere in provincial jurisdiction. And I think it's the same thing here. So my focus today is on Ottawa's failure to use its authority to adopt the right economic policies for the whole country. Whether we are talking about pipeline construction or equalization. And these policies directly affect you here in Alberta. When it comes to pipelines construction, oh my God, there have been so many bad decisions on the part of the Trudeau government that it is very hard to know where to begin. But let me summarize them. Upon taking office in 2015, the Trudeau government imposed a ban on all tanker traffic on the north coast of British Columbia, with Bill C-48 effectively killing the Northern Gateway Pipeline project. A year later, the government officially rejected the pipeline. Bill C-48, which is still in the Senate, will also prevent the construction of another pipeline, Eagle Spirit. Another bill, Bill C-69, will negatively, and you know that bill better than a lot of people. You know all about it. You know that it will negatively impact not just energy projects such as pipelines, but other industries as well as mining, forestry, port expansion. It will make everything much more complex and difficult. Any group not directly affected by the project will be able to allowed to intervene, and that will multiplying the number of opponents. This bill, and that's a little bit crazy, but this bill is also requires projects to be analyzed based on, and I just want to quote the bill, on the intersection of sex and gender with other identity factors.
What the hell does sex got to do with the pipeline?
Whatever that means.
Was he told when he wrote it?
So, forget any new project development in Canada. If this bill is adopted, investors will just go elsewhere, and they are doing that right now.
Yeah.
The National Energy Board then decided in 2017 to consider upstream and downstream emissions from the Energy East pipeline that it was reviewing. And it made no sense. A few months later, you know all that, it's history now, TransCanada predictably canceled its project. Finally, there is the Trans Mountain Pipeline Expansion Project. Here again, the investor got cold feet after years of uncertainty, and the government bought it for $4.5 billion last May. Yes, shame. It is another disaster after another one. It is costing us tens of billions of dollars in lost investment as well as tens of thousands of lost jobs. But to go back to our problem with the way our federation works, there is an even more insidious aspect to this situation. It is the idea that Ottawa does not really have the power to get those projects approved. Justin Trudeau said that, and I quote, while governments grant permits for resource development, only communities can grant permission, end of quote. But that cannot be true. There never is unanimity on anything. That's why we have a federal government. The purpose of having a country is to have a level of political authority where we can debate, coordinate, and if necessary, listen to me, impose decisions that are in our national interest. If we don't use this power, what's the point of being one country? What's the point of being one country if we don't use the power that we have? Of course, we must consult. Of course, we must try to accommodate as many people and communities as possible. Of course, we must answer as many security and environmental concerns as possible. But there has been an authority with the final say, and it is the federal government. During the debate about Energy East, you could have believed that the Montreal mayor, do you remember his name? Denis Coderre, yeah, you're right. Denis Coderre had the authority to block the project just by himself. More recently, the newly elected Quebec Premier, François Legault, you remember him? Remember what he said? Same thing. Implies that he could block a project for a national pipeline when he said that there was, and I quote, no social acceptability for it in Quebec. It is just not true. A poll done by the Montreal Economic Institute a few weeks ago showed again that the majority of Quebecers prefer to get oil from Western Canada rather than from anywhere else in the world. And they believe that pipelines are the safest way to transport it. Do you know why they believe that? Because, maybe you remember in Lac Mégantic about 5 or 6 years ago, we had a huge tragedy there. And they know that it's safer to transport oil and gas by pipeline than by train. And they know that it's safer for the environment, but also for the population. And our politicians in Quebec, they're not listening Quebecers on that. But more importantly for us, neither the City of Montreal, neither the Quebec government, nor the BC government, nor single Aboriginal communities have the power to block the construction of a national pipeline. A decision to be made by the federal government. So, here is what I propose to do to make sure that we can build the pipelines again in our country, and that the development of our oil resources once again brings prosperity and unites our country instead of dividing it.
Yeah, Max.
So, first, scrap Bill C-48.
Yeah.
Second, scrap Bill C-69. Third, simplify and streamline the process for approving pipeline construction. Four, find a private buyer for the Trans-Mountain Pipeline.
Why? You own it. Use it. You already own it.
And fifth, reassert federal jurisdiction over this issue when necessary by invoking Section 9210 of our Constitution. This section, as you may know, grants a federal jurisdiction over modes of interprovincial and international transportation and communication. Our Parliament can overcome local opposition and exercise its authority by declaring any project to be to the general advantage of our country. I said on Quebec TV in French maybe a month ago that I would be using this power to ensure the construction of a new Energy East pipeline through Quebec if this project can be revived by the private sector. Justin Trudeau will not do this. Instead, he agrees with Legault that there is no social acceptability for pipeline in Quebec. Andrew Scheer was in Quebec last week and he did not say it. He didn't have the courage to say it when a journalist asked him several times if he will use this power. He is just too afraid of the pushback from his Quebec MPs or getting bad press in Quebec. I'm not afraid. Andrew Scheer has not said anything concrete about energy apart from promising to abolish Trudeau's carbon tax. However, that's only going to remove a burden on 4 provinces that don't have a tax or a cap and trade system already. Scheer's first act when he became the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada 2 years ago was to whip a vote in favor of the Paris Accord. He promised a new plan to reach the Paris emissions target. He will add more burdensome regulation and more subsidies across the country to those already in place. I want to be very clear. A People's Party government will scrap the carbon tax and we won't do anything else. That's it. I think that's a clear choice. We will let provinces experiment with their own programs if they want. So let's move to another federal issue that is dividing our country and creating resentment here in Alberta. This is the equalization, like I said in the beginning. At any time, and at a time when your economy is hurting because of the downturns in the energy sector, you are still paying for a program that is sending billions of dollars to other provinces. And you are right. This program is unfair and inefficient for you. But not only for you, but also, I would argue, for the citizens of provinces that have been on the receiving end for decades. Manitoba, Quebec, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and PI. There is a myth that equalization at least has the benefit of helping them, but the opposite is true. Studies have shown that equalization money encourages the growth of the public sector in the recipient provinces, which bids away resources and workers from the private sector and weakens it. Equalization money encourages recipient provinces to keep taxes high and to intervene more and more in their economy. They don't have as much incentive to make their economies more competitive and develop their own natural resources, because more private sector growth will lead to less equalization money. It prevents them from developing their full potential. The system is similar to a badly designed welfare programs that use to discourage recipients from working, because they will then lose all their benefits and will be worse off than if they stayed on welfare. That's what we call a poverty trap. It's time to stop rewarding provincial governments for not adopting better economic policies. A province should not receiving equalization payments for decades, just like an individual should not be receiving welfare checks all his or her life. The program is part of our constitution. We know that, but we cannot simply abolish it. But we can make it less generous and more efficient, like the welfare reform that were adopted in the US and Canada in the 1990s that lead to a significant reduction in the number of welfare recipients. 2 years ago, I proposed, not yesterday, 2 years ago, I proposed to review the current formula and adopt a new one that will avoid the welfare trap by being less generous. It should encourage provincial governments to take responsibility for their bad decision, provide incentive to adopt pro-growth economic policies, and reduce their dependency on federal money instead of the opposite. This will not only benefit citizens in these provinces, it will make all Canadians more prosperous. And instead of breeding resentment between givers and receivers, it will make our country more united. And it was very encouraging, like I said in the beginning, I want to quote him, a month ago, to hear the new Premier of New Brunswick, Premier Higgins, essentially agree with me, and he said that federal government should cut equalization payments to force provinces to develop their natural resources. And I want to quote him, and I'm quoting him. Start of the quote. We just don't seem to want to move as a province. We are happy to accept handouts, but we don't seem to be as readily willing to make the changes necessary to allow us to contribute to our own well-being. End of the quote. This is a significant development from one premier in a province that received equalization money. And that should be encouraged, that's what I'm doing right now. We must have an open and a frank open discussion on this issue. But you will not get it with Andrew Scheer and the Conservative Party of Canada. They won't speak about it, and they are not doing that. When the current equalization formula was renewed last June by the Liberals for another 5 years, I was the only one to say anything about it in Ottawa. The Conservatives remain silent for 2 reasons. One, they take Westerners for granted. They take you for granted. They believe that they don't have to tackle these issues to win here. They have abandoned you. And once again, they are afraid to make any controversy in Quebec. Everything that I just told you, I already said it in French in Quebec, in English in Nova Scotia, in English in New Brunswick, in English in Regina, in English in Saskatchewan, and here today. And I will continue to deliver that message because it's a too important message for the unity of our country.
Yeah, Max.
But Scheer will never do that. His Quebec MPs would freak out. They are not a real small C government or free market or limited government or small C conservative principled politicians. They are just traditional politicians who will say and do whatever it takes to buy votes, especially in Quebec and in other regions of our country. I'm the only one who is not afraid to have this debate. And actually, I like to have this debate. I'm not afraid to go to every part of our country to talk about it. And it's a shame that the Conservative Party of Canada, supposed to have a strong base here in Alberta, is not doing that. But maybe in a couple of months from now they will understand and they will speak about that. But I want you to remember who was the first one to open that debate and to have the courage to speak about it. Yeah. Because I can tell you, the more I will speak about it, the more support I will have for Canadians. Yes. And the more support I will have for Canadians, the Conservatives will look at it and they won't be afraid anymore. They won't be afraid anymore. They will speak about it. I will give them some courage to speak about it.
Yeah, don't hold your breath.
But remember, it won't be by conviction. It won't be by conviction. And maybe, if they're back in power, they will listen to special interest groups and different regions of this country, and they won't deliver. So you must vote for a party who believes in the bold reform by conviction. That's the most important. Remember that. If I'm successful, in a couple of months from that, Andrew Scheer will flip-flop. And you know, I'll be happy. I will be two politicians to speak about that. Reforming the equalization formula and using the constitutional power to impose pipeline when necessary. I don't know if we'll have the courage, but right now I didn't have the courage. When that will happen, remember that. That's not by conviction. And, you know, he's doing that only to please you. But maybe when it be in power, do the opposite. So we're doing politics differently. We're doing politics based on principle. And I think that's why I can say that here, and I can say the same thing in other regions of our country. And today, personally, it's my best time in politics. I enjoy what I'm doing because I like to have this debate. That's too important for the future of our country. And I want you to stay with us. Stay with us as Canadians. We had that debate in Quebec about the independence for a couple of years. And the only way to be sure that we won't have that debate in Quebec anymore is to respect the Constitution, not interfering in provincial jurisdiction. If you want to have your own policies on healthcare, education, and your responsibility as a province, you have the full autonomy to do it. That was what the father of the Constitution wanted. We have a great Constitution. We need you in part of our Constitution. We need you, we like you, you're real Canadians, like every Canadian, and I want you to stay in our country and to build a united country with us. You can count on me at the federal level to change the government.